Just of repeating myself, apologies. But welcome everybody to your monthly session for working in mortgages. This month we've got a session around mental resilience in high pressure roles, which I'm going to be handing over to Jason in a second. But just to confirm, this is recorded. So if you aren't happy to be recorded, then if you can please leave, and you will have the recording available on the Working in Mortgages website later this week. But I'm going to now hand over to Jason.
Thanks, Gemma, and listen, welcome everybody, and many thanks for joining in your droves. I can see the numbers are ticking over nicely as Gemma was talking there. And look, today, really important session, really valuable session where, as Gemma says, we're going to be talking about mental resilience and the importance well-being plays with I suppose delivering high performance teams, and hopefully by the end of the session we'll be able to see that there's a clear link between the achieving targets, achieving high performance, and people being the best version of themselves and looking after themselves. And I'm delighted to be joined by two industry stalwarts. So Rick Beardshaw, head of sales of mortgage intermediaries at HSBC, Charlie Morley, director of mortgage distribution operations and servicing at Metro Bank, and also the fun bit will come from Angelika and Guneet towards the end of the session, where we're going to have some fun practical exercises with a bit of armchair yoga, I believe. But look, jumping straight in. There's no perfect pathway, as I say, with a mortgage, and the three of us have been involved in this brilliant marketplace for a number of years now. But there's bumps in the road along the way, and that ability to bounce back and the ability of having a mental resilience is really important. But if I start with you, Charlie, just that mental resilience bit, what does it mean for you, and just how important is that resilience in the sector that we actually all work in?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think for me, resilience isn't about being unaffected by sort of challenges or simply pushing through sort of all adversity that's kind of thrown at you. It's how you respond when things don't really go to plan. And I think if we look at our industry, I've been in the industry 30 years and we've experienced significant change, whether it's economic uncertainty, what happened in, the Middle East earlier in the year, shifting customer needs, which were massively changed by both the pandemic and the cost of living crisis, regulatory developments, or just our market generally changing. I think resilience is the ability to adapt. I think it's the ability to maintain an element of perspective, but continue moving forward despite those challenges. And I suppose the final point is, to me, is I've probably seen resilience as, for want of a better expression, being comfortable with discomfort. It's accepting that we do get setbacks. There's periods of uncertainty. They're inevitable parts of everyday life and in leadership roles as well. And the key to me is about learning from those experiences rather than being defined by them. And in many ways, I think, to me, resilience is about not endurance, but more about adaptability.
Amazing. And Rich, I mean, obviously you and I have known each other for a long time, and your characteristic is you're quite a laid back guy, aren't you? So resilience for yourself and supporting others. What's your kind of take and view on it?
So I think one of the most important things over the last 30 years or so that we've been doing this, it is the people that you surround yourself with as well makes a massive difference. So yeah, look, we've all had some incredible hardships chucked at us. I mean, I was at Lehman Brothers when it all went down in 2007, 2008, and aware where my next job was coming from, having just bought a brand new house with a hefty mortgage, and panic set in. So it's not that we haven't been through tough times, but as you get older and perhaps a little bit wiser as well, the people that you work with make a massive difference, and trusting the people that you work with in particular to do the very best they can with your support makes a massive difference. So yeah, I am laid back, but it doesn't mean that I don't care. It doesn't mean that I don't suffer as everybody else does. Because actually what I've learned to do is cope better as time has gone on. And I've done that in particular by surrounding myself with brilliant people.
And the people bit, obviously there's a theme with both of you there, which again we can come on to in a bit more detail in a few moments. But what about coping mechanisms that that each of you use in order to stay balanced and focused? Look, you've both got big responsibilities when it comes for actual sales numbers. But what do you use in terms of like coping mechanisms? I'll stay with you, Rich. So in terms of, each day, each week, each month, what kind of coping mechanisms do you use to just help?
So the biggest one for me is to talk it through properly. So don't immediately react to the problem at hand. Don't jump into solutionizing. Don't I suppose for me, walk away, talk to people about what's going on, and come up with a plan that you hope works, but also involve people across not just your own teams, but internally as well, so that you do find as a collective you can help resolve the problem. But also, if you don't resolve it, you kind of share that responsibility out amongst a lot of other people, and that helps when you've got people. So what I'm basically saying, people to talk to, I think, is the most important thing for me in particular, and certainly in the last 5 years with all the things that have gone on, and 5 massive events in 6 years. I found actually genuinely sitting down and saying, right, what are we going to do about this, or can we not do anything about it, and how do we all resolve the problem we have in front of us, has made a massive difference. So for me, the coping mechanism is people.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with that. I think also maintain perspective. I think, often in our industry, everything feels urgent, and I think one of the things we have to do is take a step back and look at what genuinely matters today, what genuinely matters in 6 months' time. And I think prioritizing is really key. And I think what Rich said there is often talking to people, prioritizing, and don't get distracted by noise. But I also think switching off is massively important. I mean, whether that's spending time with family, whether, as everybody knows me well, I'm an exercise fanatic, so whether it's taking time away and actually focusing on yourselves, and if you do go on holiday, switch off. I find it very strange that people put holiday photos on LinkedIn. I always think, just no, switch off, spend time with your family, but also make a really conscious effort to reflect as well. We do work in a really fast-paced industry, and we're rushing from one challenge to the next challenge. And I think often taking time and discussing with people, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and where you've learned from things, I think it helps you grow and gives you much more confidence when future challenges do arise.
Love that. So that obviously the theme of Mimic, and a lot of the activities we do with Mimic is that conversation, to keep the conversation going, but conversation, collaboration, and perspective, but ultimately finding ways to genuinely switch off. And I think, look, we're in the midst of our 5th annual survey at the moment, so we've gone to the market and we're just looking for responses. And what was interesting last year was there was a green shoot in terms of over 70% of the respondents actually indicated very positively that there was some kind of mental health and wellbeing framework within their firm, and that's up from 35% when we started the surveys back in 2021, which is great. But the bit of feedback, the bit of narrative that came back consistently with the survey was the importance of role models. So being part, having a structure, having a framework is all well and good, but it can't be a token gesture, right? So actually delivering, having role models who walk the walk. So switching off. So we're not sending necessarily emails at 11 o'clock at night. It's incredibly hard for us though, because look, I know when something pops in our head, you actually want to do something, but there are great tools around us now, particularly digitally, to time emails, and there's all sorts of things around us. But just coming back to the Teams bit then, so I just want to talk about I suppose that environment that you try to create. So again, really successful sales environments that you both lead, and what just creating that safe environment. So if I start with you, Charlie, on this one, so just how do you go about just creating that structure and framework that gives people the confidence to feel safe, so honest conversations can actually take place?
Yeah, I think, if you're looking at sort of whether it's psychological safety or anything like that, I think it starts fundamentally with trust. I think people feel that if there's a lot of trust within an environment, they feel they can contribute ideas, they can challenge thinking, but also ask questions. And when you make a mistake, there isn't going to be blame or judgment, and I think as leaders, and I think, the three of us will say the same, it's down to us to really set the tone. And if we only celebrate success and never talk about setbacks, people quickly learn that vulnerability within a team isn't welcome. And to me, I think leaders who react negatively when someone sort of raises a concern, ultimately innovation, I think honest conversations sort of disappear very, very quickly. And I think the most effective teams that I've worked for are the ones where people do feel, number one, respected. Number two, I think they feel heard. And number two, ultimately, they feel valued. And when individuals feel, I think, safe to contribute, what they do is they ultimately bring their authentic selves to work. And what happens on the back of that, they collaborate more effectively. And what happens? The performance of that business undoubtedly improves because it's a much more inclusive and happier environment to work within.
Love that, and again, something that really resonates with me there is listening and hearing. So you can listen, but actually that next layer of actually hearing, so that the changes can take place is you're absolutely linked. And what about yourself then, Rich, in terms of that that kind of environment that you try to try to create so people feel there's an authenticity, but also there's a performance expectation that you have as well. So how do you go about creating that environment in your space?
So it was really easy when we first started, actually, and there'll be lots of people on the call that have inherited teams. I got to build a team from scratch 11 or 12 years ago, and therefore you go out looking for people not like you at all, but people that have got the right attitude, the people that you believe will come on the journey with you and react in the ways that you hope. So I was very fortunate that we surrounded ourselves with brilliant people, and a lot have stayed with us. And that's shown me, therefore, the type of person that we'd like to recruit as and when opportunities, whether that was through the ranks or whether that was externally, to continue to find the people that we believed would fit into what we were trying to do in the culture at HSBC. And we've developed a fabulous culture across. There's 200 of us in intermediaries at HSBC, most of which have been hand selected over the last 10 or 12 years as we've grown the business. And that makes a massive difference. It is much harder when you inherit staff that don't believe in the same things that you do and haven't, it takes longer to build the trust that Charlie spoke about as well, because that's super important. I'm fortunate for sure in able to do that, but you also have to be really clear as to what you want and who you want and what times and skills they have.
And that attitude bit, so attitude over aptitude every time.
Every day of the week for me, absolutely.
100%, yeah.
And then when you do have problems and setbacks, funny enough, the reaction that you get is so much more positive with people that feel that way. And it does, so back to your original question around resilience and surrounding yourself with great people, that makes a massive difference when you're all pulling in the right direction. But I totally agree with Charlie about the trust aspect. That's the one thing that I think it takes a while to work towards, and you have to, as a leader, you've got to demonstrate that you trust your staff. You can't micromanage. You have to support in the right areas, and then that does allow that conversation that not many people want to have. But I'm having some trouble at the moment. I can't get through this, whatever that happens to be. Can you help? Comes off the back of a trusting relationship.
Yeah. So not micromanaging, but absolutely listening, making sure people are heard, and the importance of attitude and people choosing the right kind of attitude to move forward. But behaviour wise, what kind of behaviours do you encourage from within the team, Charlie, to just sustain that high performance that is needed?
I think from my perspective, I think when you're looking at sort of a high performance team, I think it's making sure that, I think going back to the point that we said right at the very beginning, is allowing people to be their authentic selves at work. And to me, that is hugely important. And I think when you bring your authentic self to work, ultimately you build teams where the narrative between the team is very open. People can share their opinions, share their views, and challenge in a comfortable environment. And ultimately, what that then does, Jason, is improve the performance of the team, but ultimately improves the general working environment, so people feel much more comfortable in the environment they work for. And if you get comfort within a business area, you also get retention of your team as well. Your high performers will stay in a business is not necessarily just down to elements like reward. It's also how they feel within the business that they're actually working in.
Yeah, I love that.
And do they truly understand the contribution that they're making to that business? Because that's what people want to know. You know, what's my impact on the business? How's that impacting what I do on a day-to-day basis and influencing the wider bank? Yeah,
love that. So that openness and authenticity and other aspects we've touched on there are great. What about showing vulnerability? So I mentioned your role modeling and the importance of leading from the front. It's not always easy for leaders to actually show vulnerability, but how comfortable are we showing that vulnerability, and maybe also follow up with those that are around us that show vulnerability? How do we best support them? So how easy is it for us to show our vulnerability individually as leaders? And then the follow-up is, how do we support those around us who may be showing some vulnerability?
I mean, Jason, I think it's essential. I really do. I think early in my career when I started, I kind of thought leaders needed to project certainty at all times. I thought they needed to have the answers to absolutely everything. And as I suppose, gone on in my career, I think what experience has taught me is that I don't expect leaders to be perfect. I expect them to be authentic, and the best leaders that I've worked for are the ones that are authentic. And I think when you are open, it ultimately builds trust across your teams. And I think when leaders are honest about challenges, lessons learned, and areas where they don't have all the answers, I think what it ultimately does, it creates stronger connections with teams, and also it gives people, for want of a better word, permission to speak up about their own challenges, their own development needs. And I often say that vulnerability isn't about oversharing, it's about being a human being, and I think balance is massively important. Teams look to leaders for stability, they look for leaders for optimism, but they ultimately want authenticity. And to me, I think the best leaders I've ever worked with are those that are confident enough to say, I don't have all the answers, but together we're going to find a way to move forward. And that to me is really, really important, really important.
Yeah, I like that. What do you think, Rich?
So I agree with that. It is difficult to show vulnerability, but if I bring it back to just from a work perspective, so when things aren't going well, and let's say your service has been poor for a while, the people who get it in the neck the most are at the front line, and they're getting phone call after phone call about how poor your service is and how how rubbish your organisation is and how it's all their fault. And if as a leader you turn around and you say, well, there's nothing wrong, everything's okay, that's the bit that we've worked really hard on, to say, look, we understand. And Chris and I have a Friday call with the majority of our frontline sales team where we can talk about performance for the week, but also acknowledge where things aren't going right, and fight the fight with them to explain why it's gone wrong. And that's what they then expect from the leaders, is an acknowledgement that things aren't going well, but what are we going to do to fix it? And they want to hear about it, and they don't want to hear about it in 6 weeks' time when the wheels have been off. They want to know immediately. So that's where we try and be as really open as we possibly can be, is on things that aren't particularly going right, acknowledging it really early, trying to understand where it is. But to Charlie's point, when you don't understand why, or you can't fix it, explaining why you can't. But then they have to trust you that you'll go away and try. And I think that's the most important thing, is that you do what you say you're then going to do, even if it's, we're just going to try and solve this. And we've worked really hard over the last few years to make sure, and I hope, if I've got teams on here as well, I hope they'd say that we are really open and honest. Sometimes maybe we overshare. And there is a fine line between, some things the business just wants you to do and staff aren't going to like it. And sometimes you have to toe the company line. That's cool. That's the job that we get paid to do. But where things are going wrong that that they need your help on, acknowledge it early, talk about it, and try and resolve it.
It's amazing how beneficial it is to tell the truth and be honest, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah,
people, particularly in on the mental health and wellbeing side, we see. Look, I'm no mental health expert, but have people come towards me, and the overthinking that takes place, and the what might happen rather than what's actually happening is is so prevalent. And look, I think you covered a bit. I was going to talk about perspective, but I think you've covered that off. But at times, Rich, when maybe there are those challenges around the service, and look, it's not a coincidence. We always see a spike in the number of signatories becoming signatories when there's periods of volatility in the market. So when you're unfortunately forced to take some actions around your products, etc., the guys at the front end within your business are taking the call from the brokers. So we see a number of firms becoming signatories during that period. But supporting your teams at times when it's like that. I mean, I guess you kind of answered it in terms of that honesty and giving them confidence around the certainty in how you're going to fix stuff, because nothing lasts forever, right? So it's temporary. But I suppose I'm just trying to understand the kind of support you provide at that time. Is there anything else other than that? Being honest and giving them confidence that it's temporary. And, there are fixes in place.
And be a little bit more flexible. So the one thing we do in particular is acknowledge when service issues, for example, come up, that you can't have your BDMs out on the road 5 days a week because the phone's ringing off the hook. So on occasions we've said, right, why don't you just work from home for a couple of weeks? Let's take the pressure away of doing the upfront stuff, and let's just work with our brokers on this. I think that's really important. But we also check in more often than we ever would do. So from a management perspective, we're very clear about when the pressure's on, that's the time to phone your staff and check how they are. And that's really important. It's really difficult for a lot of us on this call work remotely. So we're out and about, but actually how often do you actually get to sit in front of your line manager or your colleagues? It's very rare. And there's a big job for management absolutely to do, but also colleagues. And I think it goes back to one of the earlier points. You surround yourself with great people. If you build great teams, they look after themselves, they look after each other, and they work together. We've all been BDMs a long time ago, for example.
Very long time ago.
In your case, yes. You need people to talk to, and you need someone to moan to. And all of that's really important. And I think and some of it's happen chance that you actually come across how does all of this work, and it's difficult to put into place a process that operates that way. You just hope that you've got the right people that would do this anyway, and I think most of the time you have. And then when you haven't, that's when you need the likes of yourselves and as you said, the help that can happen from a mental health perspective. And HSBC are amazing, by the way. The support that we offer in the background for people that suffer is phenomenal, and our job really is to make sure we understand what that help could potentially look like and make sure that the staff have got all the support they need to get through this.
Love that. And Charlie, I mentioned before about that positive statistic last year around more firms, more respondents were indicating that there was an increased number of firms that were actually offering this mental health and wellbeing kind of framework, which is great. And I just want to accelerate. We've only got another 5 minutes or so, I just want to accelerate a little bit. But your gut reaction in terms of wellbeing, has it improved in the sector? So do you think we're making some progress?
Yeah, I think it's massively improved, Jason. I think, when I look back to where the industry was 10, 15 years ago compared to where it was today, the conversation around well-being has completely changed. I think it was a topic that used to sit on the sidelines. I remember I did quite a lengthy bike ride with Ben 13, 14 years ago, Ben Thompson, and we did it for Rethink Mental Health. Virtually no one had really heard about Rethink Mental Health. And I think it was a topic that genuinely sat on the sidelines, but I think it's now in boardrooms, it's now in leadership meetings, and it's industry events like this one. We wouldn't have been having this conversation 10 years ago. So I think there's much greater acknowledgement about mental health, about well-being, but also I think they're not separate to business performance. I think they're fundamental to it. And initiatives that, you've done with Mimic, I think they've increased access to support, services, and more open conversations. And I also think we've become better at recognizing that well-being isn't just about supporting people when they're struggling. It's about creating environments where people, I think, can thrive, they can develop and, build their career over a long time. And that said, I don't think we're at the finishing line. I think we've made an immense amount of progress, but I think there's a hell of a lot still to do.
Yeah. And Rich, I mean, you obviously mentioned, a business like HSBC, there's a real fantastic infrastructure and framework sitting behind with your employee assistance program that you've got there. What kind of tips and hints would you maybe indicate to maybe people who are listening today around, if they just want to get started by putting something in place? So you mentioned the importance of conversation and other bits. Where would you think somebody needs to start? What kind of hints and tips would you give a business principal listening today?
Absolutely try and find a way of having this as one of the support mechanisms. I know it comes with a cost, inevitably, and clearly the bigger the organisation, the more of this kind of gets swallowed within your entire Bupa offering or private health or whatever it happens to be. But mental health is different, and having a support function available is so important. Where would you start? I'd talk to you. I think you can really point them in the right direction and help them out, because you're right, these are small businesses that won't necessarily have the access to the infrastructure that we have. Therefore, call on people that can help you maneuver your way through this. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it's so important. And the other thing I'd encourage anybody on the call that is and ahhing about whether they should go and get some help or just do it. It's we've gone through it personally at home. We've done it through work with colleagues as well. The difference is phenomenal, and it's such an important part.
And I'm going to bring Angelika in a moment, see if there's any question I've not asked that I should have asked. So I'll bring Angelika in a minute. But just before I do, just a final question to each of you, really. Just you obviously got that successful DNA with the within that team dynamic you've got at the moment. But just keeping and retaining staff and what. So in order to maintain that performance, I suppose I'm interested in what do you do with your team so you retain that talent, and so we get we maintain performance. So probably a poorly worded question really, but I suppose it's that combination, retaining talent, but at the same time still driving that commercial performance.
I've always said, so I love to have a conversation with everyone, which is what do they want to do, and if I can't placate their ambitions within the organisation, I'm cool with that. If I have a conversation and I help somebody develop through time and they have to leave in order to succeed, I'm good with that, because that's my fault. But what I really hope that everybody on the call is asking and having those conversations about where they want to take the career and what help they need to get there, because actually bizarrely by doing that, people stay with you longer anyway.
Yeah. I think you're right, and I think one of the most important, it's probably one of the most important leadership questions in my view, because that we face generally, because it's often presented as a trade-off, and I don't think it has to be. And I think organisations that ultimately retain talent are usually the ones where people, I think, feel they can grow, they can contribute, but ultimately I still think they belong. Ultimately what you're paid matters. But I think increasingly people stay with a business because of the culture of the business, the purpose of the business, what are the development opportunities, but also what's the quality of the leadership and what's my experience on a day-to-day basis. And I think from a commercial perspective, when you're looking at a business, I think retaining experienced talent isn't just good for the culture, it's ultimately good for the business. So I think from that perspective, it's often how you feel at a business is how you retain talent too.
Amazing. And so before I maybe summarise this little segment and to bring in Angelika. So a really brilliant conversation there with the guys, and I think I got through the questions I hoped to get through. But was there anything I missed? I'm conscious of time, and look, I know everybody should be really excited about the next bit, the next fun bit. And was there anything that I didn't ask the guys that maybe I could have asked them, or any kind of burning questions you have for the two chaps?
Look, thank you so much for sharing your insight and experience. I've been jotting things down as you were answering them, because there was a lot of things that you said that resonated with me. And I think one of the biggest sort of messages that I've taken away from this is that resilience isn't about just sort of pushing through or doing more. It's more about taking those challenges on with other people. So really being open and honest and talk through challenges with people that are around you. One thing that I think, Charlie, you've mentioned that importance of switching off. That really resonated with me, because I think as someone who's quite new to the industry, I think when I first started, I always used to think that I was being really proactive by looking at my emails at 10, 11 o'clock at night. But actually, I've really sort of learned that that's not sustainable. So I think that importance of switching off was a great advice that you've given. I think Jason has covered most of the questions that I've had. So yeah, conscious of time, so just want to say massive thank you for taking the time to being so open and honest and giving us some practical hints and tips.
And
Jason, before I
miraculously,
move away to this session, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
I was just going to say, miraculously, for me to only be 3 minutes over time is unheard of. So look, I'm really looking forward to this. Yeah, this next bit as you talk about some of the practical, well, as we can participate in some practical exercises. So yeah, over to you and Guneet.
Amazing, thank you so much. So yes, we're moving on to the second part of today's sessions. So yeah, I think one thing we often forget when we work in high pressure environments is that resilience is just about mindset, and it isn't. I think it's all about how we look after our bodies and how we manage our nervous system. And we're all busy solving problems, supporting customers, leading teams, looking after other people all the time. But how often do we actually take time to pause and check in with ourselves? My guess would be not very often at all. And that's why I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our next speaker, Guneet Khurana. So Guneet works in financial services as well. So she works at Yorkshire Building Society, but she's also a qualified yoga instructor. And today she will be taking us through some simple and chair-based movements and breathing exercise that can be done at your desk, between meetings, or whenever you need a moment to just reset and recharge. So Guneet, thank you so much for joining us today. I suppose before we get into the practical session, I'm just really sort of curious about your story, and your full-time job is in financial services. So how did you get into yoga, and what inspired you to become a yoga instructor?
Right. Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Angelika, for inviting me here. My journey is not very, very long, but it goes back around 7 years ago, just before COVID hit, when I got into yoga. And I think for many people, you think, oh, it's flexibility. So I think that was what I started off with. But over the years, I've realized it's much, much more than just the flexible element or the exercise bit. Exercise is just the byproduct of it. But the real definition of yoga is how we control the fluctuations of our mind and how are we understanding ourselves. And it's really helped me over the years with my own mental well-being. I'm 45, I'm going through a perimenopausal journey, so my hormones are just all over the place, and I'm sure that is a big chunk of the workforce as well, women in midlife. Yeah, yoga has really helped me with that as well. When I was doing my teacher training, I was almost at the verge of, I really can't do this and I should quit. But, I kept going, and I'm so glad I did, because there's so much there is to learn and share. And yeah, that's my very brief journey. I'm very passionate about yoga, so I do teach part-time yoga at care home, at my home studio. This is my studio, online sessions as well. So just moving on from there, obviously today's theme is so based on what we've been listening to. When we are under pressure, we often hold tension without even realizing it, in our shoulders, jaw, hips, and even in the way we breathe. So by just focusing on a little bit of movement. So usually yoga is seen as, when you hear the word, you think that, oh, it's a complicated headstand or some other complicated pose. It's about a perfect body, or that it's for women. But in reality, it is for everyone. As long as you're breathing, as long as you're moving, you can do yoga. And the real definition is, like I said before, is the controlling the fluctuations of mind. And I think that kind of really resonates with today's theme as well. And it isn't about the perfect pose. So what we're going to do here in the next few minutes is to ground down, and we'll move with our breath, because every gentle movement encourages circulation and it helps releasing tension from the body. So I'll just invite you all to sit comfortably in your chair, placing your hands on the knees. And I invite you to close your eyes and just focus on your breath, taking a deep breath in and out. Breathing in through your nose and exhale into a big sigh or just through your nose. Another deep breath in and a deep breath out. With every exhale, relaxing your forehead, softening your jaw, relaxing your shoulders, relaxing your chest, relaxing your belly. Taking one more deep breath in. And as you exhale, I just want you to set an intention for this practice. Intention perhaps to contemplate on the word pressure or resilience that we've been talking about. With that set, we just begin by dropping our chin closer to the chest. So just looking down and just feel the stretch on the back of your neck. Turning your head to the right shoulder, rolling it all the way back, bringing it to the left, and very gently dropping it down closer to the chest. So in the same way, we'll just do some neck rolls, moving your neck very gently. Now reverse the rotation, so taking it from the other side. And next time, when your chin meets the chest, just pause and come back to the center. Now, let's place our hands again on the knees, and this time we are going to move into cat and cow, so it's the seated version. So on the inhale, we're going to open the chest and look up, curving the spine, and on the exhale, round the spine and look down. Inhale, look up into cow, exhale into cat. Just one more time. Inhale and exhale and release. Now, let's just bring some gap between our knees. We're going to place our left elbow on the left knee. Bring your right arm by the side, raising the arm over and above into a side angle bend. So here we are feeling the stretch in the right side of the body. Just to take a deep breath in and out, and we release. We'll swap sides. So right elbow on the right knee, raise the left arm over and above, and we bend sideways. Just feel the stretch and just breathe deeply and completely. What we're doing here is just slowing down, slowing our breath, slowing our thoughts, and just connecting with the breath. And coming out. Very good. Now, from here, we'll move into seated twists. So twists are like, imagine we are wringing a towel. So it really helps with releasing toxins from our body. So we place the left hand onto the right knee, taking the right arm behind the chair, and we are twisting from the navel, overlooking the right shoulder. Again, we'll take a few deep breaths here. And release, coming back to the center. Now, right hand on the left knee, taking the left arm all the way back and twist. And breathe. In yoga, we always talk about connecting the movement with the breath, and I think that's a very important element, because when we are focused on the breath, it just helps you to slow down and just forget about any pressure or any worry that you may be having. And release, coming back to the center. Now, I'm conscious of time. I know we're running out, so I'll just move on to the next part. But just before that, let's just bring our arms by the side. And on the inhale, we're going to start raising the arms over the head. Exhale, we bring them back down. Inhale, raise. Exhale, drop them back down. And bring your hands back on the knees. Very good. Now we'll very quickly move on to a breathing technique, which is really calming and control your nervous system as well. So it works really well when in a high pressure job, or when you just want to relax. So it's called humming bee. And the reason it's called humming bee is because we basically hum and we go, so we take a deep breath in, and on the exhale we go So for as long as your exhale allows you to. So we'll do 7 or maybe 5 rounds of the humming bee. So let's just again sit comfortably. So the spine needs to be elongated. So just straighten your back. Let's take a deep breath in. And as we exhale, just close your lips and we hum. Again, breathing in. Again. Again. Last one. And relax. You've noticed that every time we are in any stress or any difficult situation, it's the breath that really changes. Either it gets shallow or it gets really fast. So it's really important to control the breath, to calm yourself down. And yoga really helps, and the pranayama, the breathing techniques really help to do that. So just come back here. And one of the tips I'd really like to give is, which is very nice and easy. After, it's called Shatapada, which means 100 steps. So every time you're feeling a little bit anxious, nervous, or under pressure, just step out, leave your chair, go out, and probably try to walk without barefoot, without shoes. And just that 5 minutes will really help to reset your brain, and you'll find it very, very calming. So that's all from me. So let's just bring our hands together. We quickly rub to generate the heat. And let's place them on the eyes. And blink your eyes open. Thank you for the practice. May this practice benefit us and all the people around us. Namaste.
Wow. Namaste. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Guneet.
I'm really sorry, I've really rushed it, but I hope everybody would have got something out of it. So thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you so much for joining us. I've really enjoyed this, and I hope everyone else on the call have enjoyed it and took some valuable sort of lessons from this, because I have to admit, I think I used to think yoga was something that required that flexibility that you were talking about and a lot of spare time and some coordination that I don't really possess. But after attending one of your amateur yoga sessions, and after today, completely changed my perspective. I think it shows that even those few minutes a day of movement or mindful breathing can really make a difference on how we feel and perform for the rest of the day. So yeah, massive thank you. I'll pop Guneet's details in the chat as well, so for anyone who's interested in learning a little bit more about amateur yoga, I will pop Guneet details so you can follow her on Instagram or Facebook. I think that brings today's session to a close. So Jason, I'll pass over to you for some final remarks.
Thanks, Angelika. And listen, Guneet, brilliant. So I know it was only 15 minutes, but absolutely great. I really appreciated your time. So yeah, thank you very much. So just to finish off, I'm just going to summarise a little bit if I may, and then I'm just going to bring Gemma back on just to talk about next month's Lunch and Learn. So look, some of the key takeaways that I personally took from the conversation with Charlie and with Rich. So two brilliant business leaders, two great blokes, and emphasising the importance of conversation, emphasising the importance of collaboration, and having some perspective. So it's really difficult not to overthink, but just have that conversation and find ways to actually switch off. So what is it we can do to actually get into a headspace where we can really switch off? I think people performing at their best when they feel supported. High performance cultures have to be healthy cultures. So if you're a business leader and you want future success, look after your people and make sure the well-being of your people are a priority in there. Resilience is built collectively, not individually, which I thought was absolutely great as well. So look, I'd encourage everybody on the call today, continue having conversation, continue sharing practical ideas with colleagues, and prioritise your own well-being. Look, in a sector where we have to serve others, we can't serve others if we're not looking after ourselves or being the best versions of ourselves. Final couple of points. So look, I mentioned during the Q&A that we've got a mimic survey taking place at the moment, and guess what? I can already forecast what some of the results are going to be. People in our sector still working long hours, not getting enough sleep, and that mental health and well-being is going to be an increasing rather than a decreasing issue in our sector, unfortunately. So some great green shoots, but ultimately we've still got a lot of work to do. And what that survey will do is the results will actually drive. So we talked about listening and hearing. What I promise everybody on this call and everybody moving forward is that the survey and the results of the survey will drive next year's actions. So delivering preventive support, what does that look like? We need to understand, and we need the respondents to help shape that for us. So please, if you can, complete the survey. 500 voices is an absolute minimum is what we're targeting. We've got Pepper who've offered to they're giving a couple of quid every time a survey response comes in. So that's contributing to equip us to be able to sustain the actions that we need to deliver next year. So thank you so much. I think we peaked nearly 100 people today, which was ace, which was brilliant. So I appreciate everybody's time, and over to you, Gemma, to talk about next month and what else we've got coming.
Thanks, Jason. Really, really good session, and thank you to you. Thanks, Angelika, Richard, Charlie, and Guneet. And that was very calming. I feel very calm. So good, set up well for the afternoon. So thanks everyone for joining. I appreciate we've overrun a little bit, but obviously, as we said, it'll be available as a recording, and please share with anyone else. We've got all of the upcoming Lunch and Learn sessions are now available on the Working in Mortgages website, and that's up until June next year. So if you haven't done already, go and have a look, get signed up for all the sessions that are upcoming. The next session that we've got is planned for the 17th of August. So again, it's a Monday every month now, and that's on shaping the future of mortgages. So we're going to be talking, there's going to be a panel session, I believe, with talking about younger people, etc. So that's going to be a really good session. So please sign up to attend that. And any of the older sessions that you haven't watched are also available on there. So everything that you might need from a Lunch and Learn session is available. So thanks, everybody. We'll leave it there, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jem. Thanks, Angelika.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Bye.